mythic admiration. For Brandon, that stardom is a double-edged sword. On one hand, being Bruce Lee's son grants him instant social cachet. On the other hand, it invites teasing, especially from kids who call him Bruce Lee's kid and expect him to be some unstoppable mini ninja at all times. The reality is that Brandon's still grieving his dad, unsure of his own place in the world, and often seething with anger at the constant references to a man he can't bring back. He develops a rebellious streak, and it doesn't take long before he's getting into real fights at school, maybe half wanting to prove he's not to be messed with, half lashing out at a world that stole his father so early. Around this time, he enrolls at Chadwick School, a private institution where one might assume star kids and academically oriented families find a structured environment. Brandon, though, doesn't exactly thrive. He's skipping classes, clashing with authority figures, acting out in ways that scream, "I need to be heard." Before long, he's expelled for insubordination and truancy. His mother, worried that he's spiraling, tries different approaches, counseling, heartfelt conversations, everything a parent can attempt. But Brandon's carrying the weight of a father's legend on shoulders too young to bear it. He's not sure he wants to become the martial arts golden boy that everyone assumes he'll be. He's equally torn, drawn to the art, but resentful of feeling pigeonholed by it. Then, like a flicker of hope, something sparks inside him. A love for acting and theater. He decides that perhaps he can use performance to express everything he's struggling to articulate. In the late 1970s, he starts paying attention to drama classes. Once he's re-enrolled in different educational settings. He reads scripts, tries to get a feel for how an actor builds a character. But then there's that other side of him, martial arts. He can't fully abandon it because it's in his blood, plus it's a direct link to his late father. By the early 1980s, Brandon was exploring both worlds. He briefly attends the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute in Los Angeles, an iconic place that once trained the likes of Al Pacino, Marilyn Monroe, and James Dean. It might seem like a huge leap, but for Brandon, stepping into Strasberg's realm offers a release, a method to channel raw emotion into onstage authenticity. Then, restless for a change of scenery, he heads to Emerson College in Boston. That's where, in the midst of East Coast hustle, he refines his sense of performance, begins reading more widely, philosophy, poetry, the works. He's starting to see the bigger picture. He can be an actor who integrates martial arts, but also does deeper, more dramatic roles. He's determined to not be reduced to the next Bruce Lee. That stings too much, and it disrespects the unique creativity he wants to share. Still, doors in Hollywood crack open for him precisely because of his father's name. In 1985, he lands his first professional gig in Kung Fu, the movie. For context, the original Kung Fu TV series from the early 1970s was famously tied to Bruce Lee, who'd reportedly pitched a similar concept, but lost out to the network that cast David Carradine. For Brandon, stepping into Kung Fu, the movie is complicated. On one hand, it's a chance to act, to earn money, to gain exposure. On the other, it feels like stepping into a weird echo of his father's past. He plays the son of Carradine's character, which basically highlights the irony that Bruce Lee's kid is working with the very show Bruce never got to lead. Brandon does the job, but he's not thrilled. He wants to break new ground, not keep dancing around in the paternal shadow. Nevertheless, each experience shapes him. Then, in 1986, he signs on for Legacy of Rage, a Hong Kong film also known as Dragon Blood in certain markets. This time, it's a more direct martial arts endeavor, though Brandon's pushing for a role that's more than just spinning kicks. He wants to act, really act, portraying a range of emotions in addition to the fight sequences. The film does decently in Asia. His Cantonese fluency helps him connect with local audiences, but it barely registers in the American mainstream. He's an odd figure in the industry, revered by some in Asia for his lineage, but not yet recognized in the States beyond novelty interest. In 1988, he appeared in a low-budget action flick called Laser Mission. Shot in South Africa, critics tear it apart. The production quality is subpar, the storyline is all over the place, and many dismiss it as a forgettable B-movie. But if you watch closely, you'll see glimpses of Brandon's on-screen potential. He moves well, exudes a certain charisma, and delivers lines with a genuine hunger to prove himself. That hunger is what keeps him going. He knows that eventually he'll land the right role at the right time. Between 1989 and 1990, Brandon's in full hustle mode. He's living in Los Angeles, reading scripts, auditioning for roles, and training harder than ever. He's also protective of his father's name. Multiple studios approach him with proposals like Bruce Lee's son in a new martial arts extravaganza or Brandon Lee the Next Dragon. He rejects most of them because he can smell the exploitation. He doesn't want to be a marketing gimmick. He wants real acting gigs that incorporate martial arts organically, not as a cheap cash-in. He's also refining his own style of fighting, blending Jeet Kune Do with elements of Western boxing, grappling, and cinematic choreography. He's forging an identity. If his father was about the essence of martial arts philosophy, Brandon's about bridging that philosophy with mainstream relatable acting roles. Then in 1991, he co-stars in Showdown in Little Tokyo opposite Dolph Lundgren. This is a step up in Hollywood terms. Dolph Lundgren is recognized from Rocky IV and other action pieces. The film sees them play two cops in LA's Little Tokyo district. Brandon's comedic timing emerges. There's a scene where he playfully references cultural differences, and critics note that spark of humor. The box office performance is underwhelming, but the industry insiders see something. He's not just doing a Bruce Lee imitation. He's forging a distinct screen persona. Then in 1992, Rapid Fire hits theaters. Here, Brandon actually had input on the script. The storyline revolves around a college student caught in a web of criminals. It features insane action sequences spliced with his more reflective side. He gets to show vulnerability, a sense of justice, and an explosive fighting style. Critics catch on, praising his quiet intensity. Audiences begin muttering that Brandon Lee might just become the next big action star. The film doesn't rake in huge money, but it does well enough to prove he's got that X factor. Around 1990, Brandon's personal life shifts in a beautiful way. He meets Eliza Lisa Hutton, who's working as a casting assistant on Rapid Fire. They click almost instantly. He's a philosophical martial artist who quotes Nietzsche and reads poetry, while she's a bright spark who sees beyond the glitz of Hollywood. They loathe the superficial aspects of the industry, preferring meaningful conversations and quiet nights over red carpet posturing. By 1991, they're living together, forming a life that feels honest and grounded. Brandon starts talking about his long-term dreams. Perhaps he'll direct one day, maybe produce smaller indie films that blend martial arts with real storytelling. He's no longer the rebellious kid searching for a cause. He's a man on a mission to define himself on his own terms. Then in October 1992, Brandon and Lisa get engaged. The wedding is set for April 17, 1993. He's ecstatic, telling friends about the ring he designed for her, which includes a literary inscription referencing their shared love of philosophy and poetry. People who know him say he's calmer, more centered than ever, even though he's about to tackle what he suspects might be the biggest career leap yet. That leap arrives in the form of The Crow, an adaptation of James O'Barr's Gothic comic about a musician, Eric Draven, who is murdered alongside his fiancée, only to be resurrected by a crow to avenge their deaths. It's dark, moody, loaded with emotional depth, and Brandon sees the chance to inhabit a role that's less about flashy kicks and more about raw, haunting sorrow. Early 1993. He signs on. He dyes his hair black, trains like a man possessed, and immerses himself in the character's pain and poetry. The crow imagery, the heavy makeup, he's ready to break out of the constraints of typical action stereotypes. He wants to show the world he can be a serious actor, not just a guy throwing roundhouse kicks. He's also super pumped that after filming Wraps, he'll be back in LA just in time to say I do to Lisa. Filming begins on February 1st, 1993, coincidentally, Brandon's 28th birthday in Wilmington, North Carolina. Right away, the production is chaotic. Rainy weather, insufficient budget, and a rushed schedule create tension on set. On the very first day, a crew member suffers a severe burn accident, fueling rumors that the film might be cursed. People brush it off as silly superstition, but with each new mishap, the whispers get louder. Despite the madness, Brandon keeps morale high. He jokes around between takes, shakes off the cold nights, and shares stories about how he can't wait to marry Lisa. They talk on the phone whenever he gets a break, exchanging wedding updates. He signs letters. Soon, we'll be free of this chaos and get to start our life. As March rolls on, The Crow edges closer to completion. The plot demands multiple night shoots, capturing the story's grimy, nocturnal cityscape. Brandon works grueling hours, but people notice the fire in his eyes. They see a synergy between him and Eric Draven, both haunted by tragedy, both yearning for justice. He invests himself fully. By the final week of March, the cast and crew sense the end is near. Everyone's exhausted but excited to see the result. If the footage turns out as well as the dailies promise, it might be the film that catapults Brandon into the A-list realm. On March 29, 1993, Brandon goes through an intense fight scene. He's battered, bruised, but still sporting that trademark grin. He mentions to a stunt coordinator that he's so ready to wrap, joking that he'd do cartwheels off the set once it's done. The next day, March 30th, they prep for a crucial scene, ironically depicting Eric Draven's death at the hands of a group of criminals. The script calls for Draven to walk in on a brutal scenario, get shot, and thus set up the storyline for his resurrection. The production is behind schedule, money is tight, and corners get cut. The prop team is juggling so many tasks they forget to thoroughly check each step of the firearms protocol. They're using a real .44 Magnum revolver for close-up shots. Earlier in the shoot, they inserted dummy rounds for a sequence that required the audience to see bullets in the cylinder. Then, for the upcoming scene, they plan to load blanks, which do have gunpowder, but lack a projectile. Under normal circumstances, the prop master or armorer meticulously checks the barrel to ensure no debris is left. But that night, it appears no one performs that thorough inspection. Unbeknownst to all, one of those dummy rounds had separated, leaving a bullet tip lodged in the barrel. Fast forward to shortly after midnight. It's now March 31st, 1993. Brandon is on set, ready for the big take. Actor Michael Massey, portraying Fun Boy, is supposed to fire the gun from about 15 feet away. The camera angles are set, the stage lights are harsh, and everyone's rushing to get this done. The call goes out. Action. The prop revolver goes off. Brandon collapses as the scene dictates, but something is off. He doesn't stand up once the director yells cut. People think he might be pulling a prank or practicing a method approach. Then they realize he's not moving. Blood is rapidly soaking through his costume. Panic erupts. Director Alex Proyas rushes forward, as does Massey, who's horrified. They scramble to figure out what happened. Brandon is rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Lisa gets a frantic call, as does Linda Lee Cadwell, Brandon's mother. Everyone's told that it's serious. Doctors open Brandon's abdomen and discover that an actual bullet has torn through him, lodging near his spine. Critical blood vessels are severed, causing massive internal bleeding. They transfuse more than 60 pints of blood in an attempt to save him, but his heart keeps stopping. Surgeons do everything, but the damage is too great. By early afternoon, 1:03 p.m. on March 31st, 1993, Brandon Lee was pronounced dead, gone at just 28 years old, only a couple of weeks shy of his wedding day. The official cause, a gunshot wound leading to hemorrhagic shock and organ failure. The entire cast and crew are in shambles, especially Michael Massey, who is so traumatized by the accident that he steps away from acting for a while. Word spreads rapidly through Hollywood. Bruce Lee's son has died on set in a freak gun accident. It's almost too haunting to comprehend, given Bruce Lee's own sudden passing 2 decades earlier. Immediately, conspiracy theories swirl about a Lee family curse, but investigators conclude it's tragic negligence, a catastrophic result of cutting corners on safety protocols. In the days that follow, heartbreak envelops everyone who knew Brandon. Lisa is inconsolable, having lost her fiancé days before they would share vows. Linda Lee Cadwell, who's now lost both her husband and son, can hardly find words to describe the depth of her sorrow. Shannon Lee, Brandon's sister, braces herself for a second round of unimaginable loss. On April 3rd, 1993, Brandon's funeral takes place in Seattle, where Bruce Lee was also buried. About 200 people attend, including close friends, family, and several celebrities, like Lou Diamond Phillips, David Carradine, and others who recognize Brandon's budding talent. He's laid to rest beside his father at Lakeview Cemetery. The headstone bears a quote about life's illusion of inexhaustibility. Because we don't know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. It's only an illusion. In that moment, it feels painfully true. He'd barely begun to explore his full potential. Production on The Crow halts. Some crew members quit out of grief or fear. But after a pause, the decision is made to finish the film as a tribute to Brandon's work. The final scenes are completed using stunt doubles, advanced digital techniques, and script rewrites. When The Crow is eventually released on May 13, 1994, it resonates with critics and audiences in a profound way. It's visually stunning, emotionally raw, and it becomes a box office success, earning over $50 million domestically. Part of that success is credited to Brandon's posthumous performance, which now carries an ethereal quality. The parallels between Eric Draven's violent death and Brandon's real-life fate are almost too eerie to handle, yet people flock to see it, maybe to witness that final piece of Brandon's soul captured on celluloid. Over time, The Crow attains cult status, frequently topping lists of best comic book adaptations and modern Gothic tales. Investigations confirm that it was indeed a tragic accident caused by negligence. The studio and Linda Lee Cadwell reach a settlement. No criminal charges are filed, though everyone from the prop master to the line producer to the production manager endures intense scrutiny. After the incident, Hollywood implements stricter guidelines on prop firearm safety, at least in theory. Accidents do still happen in the industry, but this case stands as a dark reminder of how easily complacency can lead to lethal mistakes. And so a swirl of conspiracy theories also emerges, linking Brandon's death to the swirl around Bruce Lee's. Some fans talk about a Lee curse, pointing out the uncanny coincidences. Father and son both dying young, both at the cusp of enormous success, both in ways that provoke widespread speculation. Official investigators, however, dismiss any notion of a curse, pointing instead to medical misfortune in Bruce's case and bungled prop management in Brandon's. But that doesn't stop rumors from persisting, especially in certain corners of the internet. Following Brandon's death, Lisa Hutton becomes an advocate for tighter on-set safety standards, speaking out about the heartbreak of losing someone to a preventable mishap. Shannon Lee steps up as a figurehead for the Bruce Lee Foundation, promoting her father's philosophy of martial arts as a means of self-discovery, not just showy violence. She includes Brandon's memory as part of that ongoing mission, reminding fans that the Lee legacy isn't just about unstoppable fists and fancy kicks. It's about philosophy, self-expression, and living fully in the face of adversity. Over the years, Brandon's final performance in The Crow grows in stature. New generations discover it, fall in love with the rawness, the blend of macabre style and tragic romance. They dig into Brandon's backstory, realize that his star was just beginning to ascend when it was snuffed out. They read about his sense of humor, his rebellious teenage years, his philosophical musings, his love for poetry and reading. They see how he strove to be more than a martial arts actor, wanting to explore deeper character arcs. In that sense, The Crow stands as both a heartbreak and a triumph. Heartbreak, because it's overshadowed by the real-life sorrow of his death. Triumph, because it shows his powerful range and uncanny magnetism on screen. Many fans can't help but imagine alternative timelines. What if Brandon had finished The Crow without incident, gone on to star in sequels or other big projects? He was only 28 after all, about to get married. He had the spark that could have carried him through decades of cinema. Maybe he'd have directed. Maybe he'd have collaborated with influential filmmakers and shaped a new wave of action drama hybrids. We don't get to know. His story is a reminder that life can shift from normal to cataclysmic in seconds. One moment you're filming a scene for a movie, the next you're fighting for life in an emergency room, everything undone by a single bullet that shouldn't have been there. For Linda Lee Cadwell, burying her son next to her husband is a pain few can fathom. She wrote about those experiences in books and interviews, describing Brandon as the child who wore mischief like a badge but also harbored a deep empathy. Meanwhile, the world continues to watch Bruce Lee's legendary status grow, and inevitably, Brandon's name reemerges in that narrative. There's a certain tragedy in how often father and son are spoken of in the same breath, each passing overshadowed by sorrow. Yet there's also a poetic sense of unity. Father and son, side by side in Lakeview Cemetery, each leaving an undeniable impact on martial arts cinema. Concerning Michael Massey, the actor who pulled the trigger that night, he lived with guilt for years, describing it as the worst nightmare possible. He was never indicted, never blamed by law because it was an accident, but carrying that memory is a heavy burden that overshadowed parts of his career. It's a stark testament to how a single oversight on a film set can ruin many lives. From that point on, Hollywood started being more vocal about strict prop procedures, double and triple checks of barrels, the near-complete phasing out of live firearms, whenever feasible, thorough training for cast and crew. Even so, accidents continue to happen, proving that Brandon's death might have spurred better protocols, but didn't solve all underlying issues of corner cutting or rushing. Brandon Bruce Lee's story is as haunting as it is inspiring. He grew up under the colossal shadow of Bruce Lee, rebelled, flailed, and eventually found his purpose in an acting style that combined physical prowess with genuine emotional depth. He overcame the chip on his shoulder, enough to embrace martial arts as part of his heritage but not let it confine him. He fell in love, planned a wedding, and took on the role of a lifetime just as his star was set to blaze. That's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed it, smash that like button, drop us a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss our new content. Thanks for watching.